Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on when you're watching this. My name is Karen Griffith. I'm an inner freedom and happiness coach. I also teach around mental fitness and also offer something called NLP, timeline therapy, which assists in dealing with difficult emotions. So before we begin, I thought I'd reference the book that I've mentioned quite a few times because it felt relevant to today's topics that I've decided to raise. I normally do this on Monday, it's just given my schedule. I'm not going to be able to do it tomorrow, I won't have the time, but at least I've shown up today, so hopefully there's something there for you. Anything that resonates, please do feel inspired and motivated to step into action on whatever you've gathered. If something doesn't resonate, let it go, that's okay. I'm also open to feedback. It's really useful to get an idea of things that you're interested in. As I've mentioned before, I do love to research. It's one of my quirks, my nerdy quirks. But if there's something that I haven't covered that is relevant around the mental fitness, wellness, health coaching, do let me know. Send me a direct message if you're more comfortable. Anyway, I've referenced Outwitting the Devil. Why? There's quite a few nuggets of information in that book, and I would advise any parents that are watching this with young children to read it. Then because I do firmly believe it's going to help you perhaps in guiding your children towards something that's purposeful and meaningful in instilling habits. When you read the book, you'll have a better understanding of the place where I'm coming from. But I'll highlight two things for today's topic. One of them being the law of cause and effect. In other words, karma. It's also known as the law of forgiveness. Why is this important? And I tend to say that a lot, don't I? But it's just so that I can drive home certain points, their relevance. If I don't think I'm quite hitting the mark, I'll try again, and I'm okay with that, so I hope you bear with me. So the law of karma, why is that important? I'd like you to think about karma as a boomerang. It has a tendency to circle back on the sender. What does that mean, Karen? It means being responsible and accountable for our actions and behaviours towards others, particularly if they are not balanced and they also could do harm to self and others in their experience. Something I've learned in my journey, especially as I become more self-aware and I work on the areas that have been problematic. Sorry, I'm having difficulty pronouncing that are causing me problems, challenges, especially when I recognise they are on repeat. I take responsibility for my part in that happening and clean it up. In respect of law of karma, it's recognising it's not always conscious, sometimes it can be unconscious, which is why I also encourage introspection and to reflect back, something that I do intensely as a coach, just to recognise that sometimes I could be harmful to others in how I show up. Why is that relevant? Again, the law of karma has a habit of boomeranging, and it comes back, and it's a matter of when. And it's, if you were to quote scripture or the Bible, we reap what we sow. And in my experience, as I become more self-aware and more attuned to what's going on for me and inside of me, I see the consequences come back really quickly, which is why I'm starting to own certain habits and behaviours that have not been serving me and certainly not serving others, and seek to clean them up. And this is taking judgment and what's the other piece that I was saying to say? Judgment, right or wrong, good or bad, it's just what is. So I would just encourage you to look at your own experiences. Where is it that's possible for you that you're showing up that could be of harm to yourself or of harm to others? And on the understanding, and think like a boomerang, and just consider for one moment if there's something you're deciding, or there's something you're doing, or there's certain habits you have that you know that are not serving you. Just for a minute, flip the coin and just imagine that the person on the receiving end of whatever it is that's right and true for you, what is the impact on them? Because I'm certainly seeing that unfortunately there is a large majority of people that are unaware of their impact on others, their behaviours, their habits, that is actually doing harm. So I would urge you again to read the book if you can, Outwitting the Devil. There's plenty of other resources out there, and you're more than welcome to talk to me if you feel comfortable with doing that, just to see what is there for you and to look at your personal experiences. Again, it's not about punishment, it's about I'm going to call out myself, but it's about looking at the areas in your life where you could be showing up that you're not actually putting in what is serving the greater good. And I'll just leave it there. Thank you for joining. Welcome. So that brings me on to another piece. I like to think of some of the work we get to do, and you probably hear this often in my lives, is that we get to work in the areas where we can be better. And one of them is mastering our critical voice. It's the voice that often is telling us in some ways not to do things, or that we can't, or it's not available for us. And sometimes it could be how we were raised, it could be what we've experienced in life and the decision we made about an event at that point in time and moment. So as an adult, if it happened in childhood, for example, it's looking at it from a point of view that it's not serving you anymore, so that you start to address it. Why is it important? The critical voice often is a voice that keeps you safe, in other words, the ego, but it will also keep you stuck. And this is where it's recognising what is comfortable for you is not necessarily good for you. And I said earlier, judgment piece, but the reason why it matters is if there's things that you desire to experience, bring forth, create, or want to enjoy, or just to have that joy, passion, excitement in life, it could be, and this is self-sabotaging behaviour, that you've got some dialogue going on inside of you that is not serving you, and until you pick up on it, it's going to remain on repeat. So it's understanding that there's parts of you that are in actual fact frozen in time, and it could be parts of you. And an indication that what could be occurring for you is if there's certain habits and patterns that are on repeat that actually you don't want to do, it's not serving you, but somehow you're stuck and you're resisting change. You're not doing the thing that you know that's in your best interest. And often that is because, and I'm sure I've said this before, there is a payoff. So it's looking for that payoff, for that behaviour pattern or behaviour that is helping to keep you stuck and also safe, which is all going up in here and not in here. Here is where we get to experience the things that are meant for us. In here, it works to a degree, and there's nothing wrong with logic, there's nothing wrong with reasoning, and there's nothing wrong with wisdom. But sometimes there's those gentle whispers, the intuitive hits, or the gut that comes from the stomach, or the intuitive hit that tells you that maybe, just maybe, there's something else there for you, and to follow that instead. So I mentioned Frozen, and it's the invitation to look at what possible things are coming up for you that are on repeat, on loops, that you might want to take a look at. There are ways of working through what is right and true for you. I've always mentioned journaling as one of them, and that takes a number of years. It could be quick if it's already a habit for you. And there's different journaling types. I have a number of journals that I keep, but I find the fastest, and certainly been my experience since becoming a coach, being coached, becoming a coach, and still being coached in the areas that I'm looking to move the needle in and get support. Also to have that conversation where you start to have reflected back what you're saying, and you start to pick up on a pattern, the repetitiveness, because what you resist will persist. And that's really important to understand, because in your discipline, rituals, routines is where you're going to get your success. So ergo, some of what is not serving you, your outcomes or your results that are not what you want, there is something to be said about looking at those habits, routine, rituals, and understanding which ones may need to have your eyes on it, look at it, and see what can be changed. And again, that's something I can facilitate. Just to hop on a call with me, there's a link in the bio which I will provide, and it's also in my profile should you wish to have a chat, just to see what is the best way to move forward. So I'm going to move on to another piece, which is accountability and responsibility. I mentioned it earlier, but could it be possible in your experience, because of ego and pride, that you've got a pattern of blame shifting? And this is something that took me a while to pick up on myself. It's where we go into victimhood. Sorry, hopefully that's come off. Victimhood. And what I often point out, and also point out to clients, is for every finger you point at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back. So it's really important to look at where you blame, complain, justify, and start to take responsibility for the part you've played in something happening that wasn't what you wanted, wasn't what you desired. And before anybody comes at me, because I do get there are instances where things happen outside of our control, and I get it, haven't been there myself, and it can be quite distressing when you find yourself helpless, powerless, and to the degree where you feel you just have no power. And a way of reclaiming your power and taking it back does require you to look at the way you have responded or reacted that has played a part in that event, in that experience, or that part of situation or circumstances. And I say this with love because I know, being there myself and still being there myself, when I review the things that haven't served me, that have caused me pain, and I've noticed that some of it's been going on for a number of years, that it did require me to acknowledge that I was the common denominator, and something had to change inside of me for my outer experience to change. So I then move on to decisions, how you make decisions. And I would encourage you to take time to slow down in your decision making. Something that came up for me that I will share is I didn't actually realise how impulsive I was. And that was because I wasn't necessarily understanding my emotional states that were causing some of my reactivity. So by taking time for myself, grounding, centering and slowing down the tempo, and also not reacting to somebody else's urgency, because that was the people pleaser in me, which I got to unlearn, and that's also available to you, is to recognise that sometimes our decision making can be flawed if it's from an emotional place, particularly if it's fear-based. And this was something that was true for me as a former people pleaser, and there's still times it shows up. However, as I explained earlier, I get to clean it up when I spot it, and it's always useful to understand if there are moments where you're being pressured into a decision and it's not in your comfort zone to say no, which is a complete sentence, by the way, or not yet, or can I have some time, just to slow down, just notice, because the reactivity, I guarantee you can feel it. It's a bodily thing. So when you learn to master your emotions in a way that serves you better, so you slow down the tempo, you're grounded and you're centered, you will not allow others to rush you into their full sense of urgency. And I share that with love because often we are reactive and other people can experience our reactivity to their benefit. So again, I lovingly encourage you to look at the ways you're making your decisions. Are they love-based or fear-based? And also to throw in, just to be careful of the waves. I've mentioned on another live, you can experience a number of emotions on one day. Sorry, in 1 minute, I meant, not on one day. Although that's also equally true. So if you start to pick up on your internal chaos, I'll call it, your internal weather patterns, and you're attuned to it, and it can be very subtle when you start to master a bit more and take care and responsibility and accountability for your responses, reactions, what is coming up for you. I guarantee that when you start to notice your highs and lows, that actually the key is in a calm, confident, empowered state, which is neither there or there, it's just there. And that requires you to be present in your experience, present in the here and now. So anything that's taking you out of that, I would urge you, especially if it's a key decision, to take the time to slow down, whatever you need, whatever's required, take up space. So I've got a feeling I'm running out of time. I don't want to go too long on this live because I've also got to do a YouTube video. I get to do a YouTube video, so again, I'm calling myself out on my stuff. So, so I'm going to go back to Outwitting the Devil. Great book. And highlight again distractions. If it's not serving you, if it's not elevating you, then it's not for you, it's a distraction. And I have, in my experience, realised that I've spent 8 years around when I started to become more aware that my ladder was up against the wrong tree. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't happy, why I wasn't satisfied with the things I was getting and the experiences. And when I took the accountability, which was quite difficult at times, to a degree it was painful, but it was also less painful than what I was experiencing because it just wasn't for me anymore. But I was reluctant to let go. I know I've shared with them. A few of my closest friends, you know, I used to hold on to things with claws, teeth marks. And when you learn to let go, which is something I also mention quite a lot in my copy, in my content rather, and in my videos, when you learn to let go, you start to experience life in a different way, in a more freeing way, because when you let go of the sources of distractions, and sometimes they can be quite destructive because you could be literally doing things that are not serving you, you're not getting what you want, you get frustrated. And take it from someone that worked in an elderly people's home from a very young age, and I also worked with the mentally ill. And you would have thought I would have learned from that. But from those experiences, I realised that it's really important to live your life to the fullest because you never know what's around the corner. And even though I had those experiences and I got it, I got how to value my life and how quickly it can pass by. And I would invite you to have a conversation with somebody in palliative care, so do that kind of work, so you recognise the regrets. There's a book, I think it's Brian and Ware, she's a New Zealand writer, the top 5 regrets. And that's another resource. I mean, the top 5 regrets you can imagine is not living your life, perhaps living a life for others. And that's sometimes what direct distractions appear as. You're living life to make somebody else happy at your expense. So I kind of feel it's a good place to leave this conversation, or rather, because I'm just talking. Thank you for those that joined me for the brief moment on the live. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll just recap on some of the themes or the topics that I covered. Again, I recommended Outwitting the Devil. I also mentioned law of karma, law of cause and effect, be responsible and accountable for our actions. Also to be mindful of blame shifting. For every finger we're pointing, there's 3 fingers pointing back. And because that links back to the law of karma, but taking responsibility for our impact on others. A look at the critical voice, maybe the ego pride, maybe having a place. Are you making decisions from a place of fear, or are you making them from a place of love? To watch the chaos, the internal chaos, the weather patterns, see what's there for you, and to work through any parts of you that could be frozen, and a place to look at the habits, patterns and behaviours. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you got value, please do let me know. I value the comments. Please like for the algorithms. Please share with anybody needing to hear what I have to say. If there's anything that you would like me to help you with in terms of support, please feel free to get in touch. I'll be honoured to support that for you. Also, feel free to let me know if there's any interest at all in feminine wealth building, the foundations. I've got a 21-day challenge. Just ping me a message if that's of interest. I'll also be starting the next cohort of the Queen's Code. I'm really excited about that. I can certainly share some highlights and some experiential stuff that's working. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you once again. I know I'm on repeat. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next live. Thank you.